Okay, so we're here in a beautiful afternoon here in Colorado, and we have Andrew Morrison with us, and you're with Reunion Church. So we're at our church. We were with Connection Church this morning in Longmont, and kind of sister cities in a way. Mm-hmm. But Reunion Church is in an area known as Commerce City, but a specific area of Commerce City. So tell us a little bit about this area.
Yeah, so this area is it's pretty new development, and it's just north of what we call Core Commerce City itself. It's been in development since 2012 is when they officially started building it out, and since then, so the city of the Commerce City had a population of about 22,000 people in 2012. And right now, it's at 75,000 people, and 52 to 55,000 people are just in the Reunion area itself. So this is where most of the city's getting its growth, taxes, everything.
So we're really close to the airport.
Yeah.
So this is
15 minutes. So
if you're coming north out of the airport, really easy access. So tell us about the demographics. What are the people like who are moving into Reunion? This would be more of a typical growth area in Colorado, where we're seeing a lot of people with similar characteristics moving into an area.
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of people coming from either California or Texas, are kind of the bigger places that we're seeing most people coming from. And people are coming primarily because either they're trying to escape and they've made money in California, or people in Texas who wanted to live in Colorado forever, and they made a lot of money off their house selling in Texas. And so it's a very much a transit and transplant area where people will come in. Their long-term plan isn't to stay here for longer than 5-6 years or so for the most part. They'll build a lot of equity, they'll sell this house, make a lot of money, and then move more into Denver area, or if they have kids, they'll move and get more land, essentially, for the most part. So the people are not opposed to church, but they don't see the importance of church. They have some type of church background. A lot of deconstructionists have been coming out of this. Our church right now, I'd probably say about 50% of our church is kind of in or was in that deconstruction mode of trying to figure out why the church, why do I believe this, why should I keep on believing this and stuff.
So when you start talking deconstructionism, a lot of people freak out, but it's kind of been a move among 20 and 30-something-year-olds for the most part. Yeah. So is that kind of the age group? Y'all seeing a lot of the younger families now?
Very younger, millennial and Gen Z, are primarily living in this space. The average age is 33, and it's unlike most of Colorado. There's actually a high kid population in this area, where about 1/3 of the homes have kids in the area itself. So it's a great first family community, and you'll see a lot of parks, a lot of daycares, a lot of those things directly in this area.
Now, I'll give you a difference here. You're probably about 2.7 to 3 people per household.
Yep.
Out here. The average in Colorado is probably about 2.3 to 2.4. In some communities and more expensive places, it'll be 1.7, 1.8, where a lot of retired and things like that. Yeah. So that tells you how much younger this area is. So lots of families. So that creates a unique set of opportunities in this area.
Yeah. Kids ministry and being able to do stuff for the kids is a huge impact. So we've gone to the sports games. They'll do a lot of sports games and things like that there, and we'll just serve out water, food, those type of things for them. We've done the block parties, which is primarily geared towards a lot of kids stuff, and families just absolutely love it that there's something for their kids to kind of do and come out here. And that's the number one thing that people generally are kind of looking for, is this a good spot where my kids feel safe, feel welcome, more so than even I do. So kids ministry is a must in this area. Yeah.
So when you're thinking about the opportunities to do a ministry in a neighborhood like this, how is it that you go about connecting with people?
Yeah, so we connect with people usually first outside of the four walls of the church. We can put up signs, we do all that stuff, and a few people will kind of trickle in from that. But the way we've built our community inside of our church is by meeting them here at the coffee house, paying for their coffee, getting to know them and their family. And it's usually 5 or 6 connection points before they actually enter into our church, is what we've kind of been seeing. And so they want to get to know us. They want to know that we're passionate about this church stuff. And that's where they start engaging around the questions and what it kind of looks like. What we found is that people are very skeptical of what the church can do, or pastors in general, because there's, like I said, a lot of the deconstruction, a lot of church hurt. And so they want to strike up a conversation, kind of see what we're about, why we're even kind of doing this in the first place. Very justice-oriented society, where they're like, what are you doing for the community? What are you doing to make things right? And on that level. So.
Coming from churches that support the cooperative program, when we hear church planting, I think it's kind of a misunderstanding that it's a Lone Ranger approach. You're out there by yourself, and you're in the wild, wild west trying to plant a church and amongst the darkness and everything. How has NAM and the Send Network, how has that helped you?
NAM and the Send Network have been a huge blessing for us. We didn't know much about NAM, and we only heard about some of the negatives, unfortunately, when we were first kind of hearing about it. But then we made some connections with some of the pastors, and they're like, listen, if you're church planting, you really should talk to NAM and figure this out. And there's about 3 other churches in the northern area that I talked to that were talking about this. And so gave them a call, and the assessment, first of all, was just absolutely amazing. We're very detailed, knowing our strengths, knowing our weaknesses, which helped us really kind of build out our core team really well. And then just the connections with other church planters, and kind of hearing, like, from that assessment, we've made good friends, and from the events, we've made good friends in the community who just really kind of encourage us. Because it's super easy, because you do sometimes feel like a lone wolf. Even though that's not reality and you really shouldn't be, you kind of feel like it, because you're surrounded by either churches that have been established for years, or you're hearing about all the other church plants failing. And you're like, oh man, what am I going to do here? But then you're talking to other church planters, they're like, oh no, like, yeah, we had 3 families leave, or, we're struggling to try and get into a space too. And you're like, okay, this is normal. I'm fine. Like, I don't need to freak out in this moment. So having those connections and those people in that area. I'm also bivocational. So I don't get a paycheck from the church at all. Which has been really good in this community, because they're like, oh, you're just doing this because you are really passionate about it. You're not after my money.
Helps with your credibility.
Yeah, it really helps with the credibility. But again, it also makes it pretty tough, because a lot of church resources are generally towards full-time pastors. And it's like, well, I don't have that luxury, I don't have that time. And NAM has a lot of resources for bivocational pastors, and there's quite a few bivocational pastors in the area that we're able to kind of encourage each other through this process. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you're telling us, go back to your community for a moment. 75,000 people, but 52 in the area known as Reunion.
Yep.
52,000 people, and forget Baptist churches. How many church efforts are in this area?
There are 4 church efforts in this area.
4 church efforts. So 10 years of building houses, and 4 churches have felt compelled to come in here and do work to start churches.
Yep.
That's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people
that are in need and are just looking. And it's shocking how many people I talk to, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know there were any churches in the area," because it's so
there's so few.
There's so few they don't even notice it. And so it's like, yeah, we're one of the newer ones. So
we have a really nice community center here that allows you to meet there. What do churches think in the long term in a community like this? You've got all this land around you, but it's so expensive. I mean, what runs through your head when you're thinking about long term and space? And I mean, I know those are things that keep you up at night sometimes.
Yeah.
So what do you start thinking about?
Long term, trying to think about, like, okay, it's a lot of relationships and connections that I can try to make inside the area, and just kind of helping to restore a lot of those relationships. Like, for instance, this rec center back here. First time I met them, first thing they said, they're like, we do not allow churches to meet in here, without me even asking. And I was like, well, okay, obviously there's something kind of going on here. I wasn't asking to meet in here. But several years ago, there was a church plant, that completely destroyed that relationship. They were just very mean to the staff. They weren't respectful of the contract. And so after that, they were like, no churches can meet in this area. And so we've been trying to kind of restore that relationship, rebuild it, but still, as of right now, it's like, no, you guys can't. Like, we've tried to test it, like, hey, can we hold a staff meeting here or something like that, or a team meeting? Like, no. I'm like, right. So it's going to take some time to kind of repair that relationship. And so I'm always thinking about those areas. The school that we're looking to try and get into, that we're under contract essentially with, they're reviewing it. So hopefully we get that signed very soon.
Yeah.
But that school, we built a really good connection with them. Because the principal was a church planter as well, and that was kind of like our in of like, oh, hey man, I like to help out church plants, and so he kind of helped us get started, and he kind of rolling in there and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but there's generally a concern of like, where can we actually meet, what space, and I think what we've been praying about, and what we've been thinking about, is just more. I guess it would technically almost be like cell churches, if you will, but we meet in smaller spaces. Grow to maybe a couple 100, 200 or so, and then have another group launch on the other side of reunion, and another group on the other side, because I think we'll have to be a little bit smaller in order for us to try and meet in spaces and meet the needs of the people.
So being light on your feet in that sense.
Very light, very flexible, trying new and different things all the time.
If we look at church stats and look at statistics and trends in church ministry, there is a movement to the smaller, and I think a lot of it is for this very reason, the struggle it is to get space. So those of us, in East Texas, we've got churches that have been around and on their land for 150 years.
Yeah.
So land's not an issue. Building space isn't an issue, and we sometimes take that for granted, and we forget how hard it is. Even close to us, if you go to the Dallas area or something like that, where the areas are growing, how's a church ever going to things, and those are questions that, and so you start thinking, okay, what can we do in smaller spaces, and what can we do to multiply our footprint and things like that. And I love that you're thinking creatively that way.
Thanks.
But then I think, so in an environment like this, is that actually beneficial to you, that you have a smaller space, you have a smaller group? It's not a giant building that people are just walking into as strangers. Like, do you think you would be less successful if you had a giant church and you were just kind of sitting back waiting for people to come to you?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think we're probably actually more successful in this area because of that. Because if we just went in, and this is where a lot of church plants have kind of failed in this area, where they go in with a team of 200, or like with a launch team of like 200 people with everything, bells and whistles and all that stuff, and then it's a long process to get people into the door. One of the churches that's been here for since the group started, I was talking to him, and he's like, yeah, we're trying to figure out what the new assimilation process looks like, because people aren't just seeing a sign for church and being like, oh, let's go to church. They're wanting to be engaged. There's a new, what are the steps before people will ever enter into a church itself? And so by having that smaller space, it takes a huge burden off of me of trying to fill the seats. It makes we're meeting in this small coffee house, and we've got 20, 25 people, but inside of a small coffee house, it feels very full, which is kind of a good thing, because then people are dreaming with you, thinking about, okay, where can we go? What are the relationships that I can get connected with? And, people kind of like that, as opposed to if I had a big auditorium, there's only 20 people there, they're like, oh, this place isn't going to make it. So.
I got a question. So as my church and other churches in our association begin to look for partnerships to come alongside of, what are you looking for as far as churches coming in from outside? What would you see us doing for you to assist you? Not trying to replant ourselves up here, but us coming alongside of you in this culture.
Yeah.
What giftedness do you need from us to help you accomplish some of the tasks that maybe could speed y'all up in the process a little bit?
Yeah. So the way I've been kind of seeing this in these areas, it's been very similar to what a lot of missionaries kind of are looking for when people are coming out, right? Of we might know the people really well, we know the culture, we know how they kind of respond, we need space and we need time. Like, we need our hands less full and stuff, because we're all bivocational. We're all trying to figure this out. And so one of the 2 ways that we've been most blessed by churches has been, number one, people coming out with smaller groups of teams that can help us with, community events, being able to give back to the community, being able to support the community. So we've had partner churches coming out that have helped us. Just 2 weeks ago, do a block party, and we had about 1,000 people between the 2 days coming around, just in and out, eating a bunch of food. First day we ran out of all the food that we thought we would have for 2 days. So we were like, oh shoot, we need to go get more food, because we just did it at the park right here, and we did very minimal advertising, just passing out flyers and putting out information. And just tons of people were looking for something to do, and we had great conversations of just talking to them about our church, talking to them about why we're doing this, because they were like, are you going to give me a gospel track? Are you going to do something? Like, what's kind of happening here, And it was just like, hey man, let's just have a real conversation. And my whole team was able to do that with so many people in the community, where normally we're stuck either behind the cotton candy machine or watching the bounce house and all that stuff, yelling at the kids and yelling at the parents to get out of the bounce house, So freeing up our hands so that we can, be the mouthpiece to the city and just care and invest in the people, that's been a huge way. We needed bodies to help out with the STED school, the school that we're trying to get into, because they had some projects, and we had, a partner church come out and help us with that project, and that's what helped us get the contract kind of going, where they're like, hey, these guys are kind of serious about this and helping out. So that's one way. That's a huge partnership. The other way is the continuous following up and finding out, honestly, just what we kind of need resources wise. We needed a trailer for this new space, and we're like, we don't have a trailer and we can't afford a trailer. And one of our churches donated a trailer that's more than big enough for us, which was a huge blessing, because that's a huge cost burden, things like that, and just getting those initial startup costs, or okay, you're about a year in, usually at this point we need these type of resources now at this point, and keeping that ongoing relationship as we kind of grow, and the stuff that we can kind of grow into. So you're a native Coloradan, so you're the unicorn.
You grew up in a town where I actually pastored. We didn't cross paths until earlier, but when people are thinking about what leads someone into church planting, you were in an area, there weren't a whole lot of church plants going into Elizabeth, really. When you were in Elizabeth growing up, what was that thing that clicked in your life that said, I think God's calling me into church planting?
It was one of those things where I just never took it very serious, but tons of people, a lot of my mentors had talked to me of like, you should church plant. My mentor, who discipled me throughout high school, gave me the first time to preach and all that stuff. One of the last interactions I had with him before he moved down to Texas, when I was about 20, he was like, you should be a church planter. He's like, don't be a youth pastor, don't do those things that you have your aspirations right now. You have a gift of being a church planter. And I was like, no, youth ministry is the thing that I want to do. I want to go into this, and then my father-in-law, who was a church planter, had the same thing, where he was like, I think you should be a church planter. And it wasn't until 2013 where I had a very vivid dream about church planting, and my wife had a very vivid dream about church planting as well. And that was kind of my sign of like, okay, I should probably actually look into this. And the first time, it was one of those scary moments, because the only church planting that I knew was the parachute church planting, where you go out by yourself and your family, and it's a sink or swim, or like how some people are, where God guides, He provides. And so if He doesn't provide for you, you're not supposed to be in here, And that was very intimidating, kind of learning that style. But it wasn't until starting to meet with other church planters, getting connected with other networks, where it was like, oh, there's a healthy and good way that we can church plant, and we don't have to follow any specific formula as well. We can follow there's some guidelines, there's some wisdom, but we can plant the way that God's told us to church plant as well. So
I talked about resources a second ago, and one of the things that surprises me about Colorado, and I don't know why I guess I just wasn't prepared for it, but how quickly demographics, culture, even architecture shifts from one community to the next. Like, just going down the highway, it's just random how things click. So not too far away, we were at another church that was partnering with one of our Dogwood churches, And we were having a conversation. He said one of the biggest resources they need is technology and music. And so I see this little farming community, so I see where that is now moving just a few miles from there over here, where it is younger millennials and older Gen Zs. What would be like your resources? What would you guys, I mean, is it technology, is it music, or where are y'all sitting?
Technology isn't too much of an issue for us, right? I come from, I work in the tech industry and all that stuff, so that's kind of helped out quite a bit, honestly.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of younger guys, people who know how to use the stuff,
Yeah.
have resources, have connections, which is really good. Colorado is not a musical state at all. And that's one of the benefits when someone does come out of state, they usually have a worship pastor with them, someone who is actually musically gifted. And in Colorado, that is very hard to get someone that is musically gifted, because like, I don't know what it is, but there's not a huge like music group out here, honestly. Even when you look at concert venues, there's two places, honestly, that most people will go to, and that's about it. And so definitely the worship aspect of it, and the training. Like, we've had some great people already who have kind of helped us out with some resources and tools for worship, and even connections with people who might be willing to come down and support that. So that's probably the number one thing. And then the other thing is going to be, because space is so small, the resource needs is that we need items that are super compact and that can be very durable, because you have to load them in and out quite a bit, and honestly just don't take up a lot of space. Which, if you go through like some of these mobile church and some of those guys that try to set you up, they'll give you like massive stuff, and it's like, dude, I have a table this big for my soundboard, right? Like, otherwise I'm taking up spots where people can sit.
Yeah. Right.
So we've had to get very creative and very unique in some of those resources. So that's the actual material is actually usually the actual items that can be used in a space like that is really what we need in that area.
So how many teams would you, if you had your perfect world, let's say we're talking about next spring, next summer, as the weather gets a little nicer on the backside of winter. So how many teams would you be prepared to handle, say, next summer, if they wanted to come up?
Next summer, we would probably be prepared to be able to handle about 3 to 4 teams that we would be greatly blessed with. June, July, and even May are really good months where there's not a whole lot that people kind of do. May, a lot of people will go up to the mountains because it's now starting to get nice and kind of visit that stuff, and the flowers are real pretty. July and August, everything starts drying out really bad, and people are just looking for some stuff to kind of do this a little more local and not so far up in the mountains and stuff. And so that's been a really good spot. And then in this community, Halloween is huge. It's bigger than Christmas. People will just so much more. Like, they will deck it out like crazy, and then they'll wait till like the middle of December to deck out for Christmas itself. So we'd love a team that can help us out as well during Halloween. And kind of help us do a block party in that area too.
That'd be awesome. That's a great. I didn't even think about that. That's a great idea for one of our churches out there to think about in October.
Yeah.
And if people have never been to Colorado in October,
I bet the weather's great.
it is.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing. You could have snow, you could have 80 degrees, and everything in between.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is one of the most beautiful times of the year in Colorado for people who are not familiar with how nice the weather is here most of the year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's a great thought. Appreciate you sharing that.
Would you need to use a group for an entire week, or would you recommend maybe 2-3 days?
Usually
if
about.
you had another project, it's another church you wanted to work with.
Yeah. What we've really been blessed with is like, if people can come out for 4 days, 4 to 5 days is pretty ideal for us. Where help us a day, kind of get things prepared, kind of get the word out, all that stuff. 2 days of a block party and maybe a service day or something like that. But 3 to 4 days is we'd absolutely kind of even a day of like, hey, thank you guys, let's take you guys out to some cool spots in the mountains and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
They got to experience Bojo's at Idaho Springs last night.
okay. Yeah. That's Colorado's pizza place for some reason. So,
Yeah, I'd never heard of Colorado style pizza.
it's a lot of bread. So,
Carb load for sure.
Yeah.
So, you don't look like a typical pastor, I could say.
I get that quite a bit there.
Yeah, yeah. So how's that in some ways helped, build relationships and stuff?
Yeah. Discipleship has always been a huge, like one-on-one or small group discipleship has been a huge passion of ours, and that's actually kind of our core of how we got our team started, how we're building our church, is people will get involved in our discipleship groups first, and then start coming to our church. And it's helped when I don't portray the typical pastor look. A lot of times I'll invite people to the gym. I do the strongman competitions, and I turned we have a 2-car garage that's all gym equipment. For Atlas Stones, all the big stuff and everything, and just striking my conversation. Hey man, why don't you come work out for a little bit? And then they start finding out like, oh, you're a pastor, and they're like, but you work too. And it's like, yeah, like and it starts building up that trust again of like, hey, we're just like you. We're Christians are not like the weird stereotype that you necessarily have. I mean, sure, there are some, but, we're not generally like that. But when we put together the block party, one of the complaints on social media they were like, well, why does it have to be a religious organization that puts it together? And my first thought was like, well, good luck on finding anyone else to kind of do this for free, But I started engaging with her. I was like, hey, we want community. We want to talk with people just like you. I mean, we're exactly the same. And she couldn't wrap her mind around like, no, generally, we're just like you, like, because her interactions have been so bad with churches where she's like, yeah, the minute I try to talk to someone from church, they're shoving the gospel down my throat, or they're using all this weird language and everything like that, So it's helped us a lot, kind of building those small but deep connections with people.
Yeah, but it's easy. Like I'll give a good example. In East Texas, I can walk down the road and I can call someone brother so and so. You come to Colorado, you can't do that.
No.
Because your brother might have been abusive to you.
Right.
Or this or that. And there's very much a sensitivity to that. And so you almost have to you have to rethink. So, and it's not that it's bad in either place. It's just different. It's knowing the culture and knowing that difference and your ability to interact with it and meeting people where they're at, not asking them to come meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the essence of what you're talking about there. If you're not quite like, what does that mean? That's one practical example I can give you.
Yeah. I think brother's a really good one. Or like even us talking about some of the things that we normally bring up inside of church of like, communion or tithing or some of those things. They're either new terms or they're terms that bring very bad ideas. Baptism. All those. They have all these different ideas on what people have been reading on what it means now and stuff. So reteaching the language has been huge.
So tell us what you love. We asked Doug this earlier, and he told us what he loved about Longmont. What do you love about Reunion?
What I love about Reunion is seeing these millennial parents really invest and love their kids. I'm seeing a lot of parents just trying their best to have the best relationship with their kids. I think COVID forced a lot of parents to kind of start engaging in that way. In this area, I just see dads trying to do the very best they can. I see moms trying to do the very best they can for their kids, almost to a point of like idolatry where it's like, well, okay, you should be able to tell them no in some of these things, or kind of tell them what you should be doing, but there's a genuine, they're not necessarily trying to live through their kids, they just want the very best, and they just love having their kids and stuff like that. So I've absolutely loved that. I've loved seeing like the relationship they have, the desire they have, the genuine sense of protection around their kids they have too. It's just been very, very encouraging.